Morning.
Good morning, Jillian. Nice to be sitting here with you in your
Nice to see
studio.
you.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you live?
Okay, I'm Jillian Barber. I live in Jamestown, Rhode Island. I found my way to the island and it was about 1977 and I'm never leaving. It's really possible. It's just such a beautiful place to live. It's very inspiring to live here, I think, too. It's peaceful. I grew up in Westerly, so I guess I'm a Rhode Islander, and I went to RISD, so I'm a Rhode Islander. So I went to RISD and studied ceramics with Norm Schulman, and Robert Archambault was there at the time as well. And amazingly enough, Dale Chihuly it was his first year at RISD. He was getting his master's degree in teaching, and he started that year, that first year that he was here, he started the glass studio at RISD, and I was one of his first students, which is really pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I have some pieces that I still do, a box that I made with them during that class, and I dug them out and put them in the retrospective I had at the Hoxie Gallery in Westerly. In 2022.
Wonderful.
So at RISD, I was never really interested in throwing bowls and mugs and pots. I learned how to do it, but I found hand building much more interesting and exciting. And I started making a series of really big masks of bears and wolves and lions and just big creatures. They were big, like probably that big. And then years later, I decided I wanted to make masks of the human face. So I did some of them freehand, and then I began to cast faces in plaster of Paris. Don't do this at home. You need to know what you're doing. But it's a procedure, lasts about a half an hour to have plaster on the face. And these are some. Let's see. Aha. This person is actually Alex. My friend Alex, who's a painter.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I cast her, it says here, in 1996. And I've immortalized her.
Yeah.
And she's still beautiful anyway, to this day. But I make several masks of her a year. I have many, many masks I've done of people, and their molds. So one of these days, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to press each mold and find out who these people are, because a lot of them, I didn't write their names on them, and I haven't seen them in a long time. A lot of them were private portrait masks, which I sold. But the faces that I really love, like Emily and Jamie and Alex, and that is a self-portrait of myself, which I like to do, self-portrait at 40. That's a double self-portrait by the window there. So the faces themselves inspire me to put the images around the mask, and I find that like this one is very, very ornate, very complicated. It's a whole scene of a tree women, leaves around the head, birds hidden in the leaves, and a scene at the bottom of sheep moving along. There are rabbits, birds, and this one is very complicated and it's beautiful. It's won several awards. As a matter of fact, I was adding my awards up today, and how many years I've actually been with the Wickford Art Association.
Wonderful.
It had to be the early 80s when I joined. There was a lovely woman named Irene who was the president at that time, and I think it was early 90s that I started doing the Wickford Art Festival, And so this year was my 28th year.
Gosh,
Not bad.
that's so great.
Okay.
What is the most important thing you want viewers to take away from your artwork?
Well, my work is very fanciful. It all comes from my imagination. And when people look at it, I want them to be surprised, delighted, a little bit amazed, and I don't know, and it might stir something in them. I just had 2 pieces in a big show in Providence called The Networks, and at the Waterfire Center, Networks and the Chazen Collection. You may have heard of it. I had 2 very big masks. They are a little slightly bigger than that. And I didn't know. A lot of people were there. A lot of people saw them. But the right person fell in love with them, bought them, and he's going to put them in his 3-season room as guardians looking out into his garden.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I thought, wow, not only does he love them, but they have a job to do.
Yeah.
They'll be on the wall looking out into the garden, and I couldn't ask anything nicer for them. I'm very happy about that.
That's wonderful.
Art craft show in Hartford, Connecticut in the early 80s, and this gentleman walked by, and I asked him if he would like to be cast, and he said he would. So I was staying in Westerly that summer and using a friend of mine's studio. So he drove all the way from Hartford down to Westerly, and I did a casting of him during a thunderstorm, and I remember that because he was deathly afraid of thunderstorms. So it was really, but he looks great. So, and this is early 80s. I have these molds. They last forever unless I drop them, but I don't. So it was really nice. His name is Bobby Pines. It was really lovely to see him again. And someone had just given me a bag of these broken dishes from Jamestown. So I started putting them around the head. And another friend gave me a box of these wonderful little dogs, little dog collection, that had belonged to her mother. And it said her mother's name when she was 11 years old. So these little dogs are, I don't know, 100 years old or so. So I'm very fond of this one. I'm going to put that in another show soon, when the right show comes up. I was walking along the edge of the Beaver Tail one day in the afternoon. I had a really big dog, a Russian wolfhound. We were walking along, and I bumped into this quite odd man. I knew who he was. And we just started talking. He said, "How's your work going?" And I said, "Well, I feel sort of blocked right now. I'm just taking a break." And he just looked at me with those eyes, and he said, "Just go into the studio. Just go into the studio and let your hands do the work. Your hands know what to do." And honestly, once I'm in here, if I can make myself get in here and work, it just happens. It just flows through me, through my hands, and into the work. And what I love about art is that every artist is different. People look at the same landscape that they might paint. Every single one is different. Every person who works in clay is different. There may be other people who make fish or masks, but the spirit of the person goes into the work. The inspiration that goes into the work through the person. It's different for everyone. It's fascinating. I just hung a show yesterday called The Human Canvas. Nick Williams and I hang at the shows monthly at Du Bois Gallery. So at the first week of the month, we come into a gallery and there's, 100 pieces, and we make sense of it all and hang it, and 3 hours later, it looks beautiful. And there were 4 or 5 people, 5 I think, were mostly of the human face and the human figure. So they were fascinating to see all the different expressions and moods, and they were wonderful, wonderfully drawn too, and painted. I was shopping just before Christmas, and I was over at Shady Lee, and I walked into Stephen Farrelly's art antique junk shop, and I saw this on the wall, and I recognized her. Sure enough, I went home, got out my art history book, and there she is. She was created in 1460 by Desiderio da Settignano, Italian sculptor who only lived to be 36 years old. So on the back of this is a piece of metal with an insignia of the casting company that had permission to go into museums, do castings of the original pieces, and sell them. So I don't know how old this is or where she's been, but I do know that her name is, or was, Marietta Strozzi. So, at the Wickford Art Festival, a man is looking at this, and I'm telling him the story. They're an Italian family from Providence, Cranston, I think. Riverside. Anyway, so I was telling him about this, and he's holding it, and I said, and her name is Marietta Strozzi. He looks at me in disbelief. Strozzi? He knew everything about this person, her family. The Strozzis and the Medicis were rivals in Florence at that time, in the 1460. So he knew, here she is. So I knew that. I love her. She is my new muse. So I didn't want to do a plaster on plaster casting of it. So I just did a little clay impression of her face. Clay shrinks about 7%. So this is smaller than her face. So when I did the mask of her, right here, clay shrinks again 7%. So this is a smaller face. And I painted in her eyes. So this is Marietta in 2024, believe it or not. So it's just wonderful to have that sense of history and to be inspired. She's beautiful, with images of swans around her face and flowers and a few leaves. You see her beautiful nose and lips? This is lovely. And it said in the history book that she was one of the prettiest of the patrician children. Marietta. What fun. Of Hannah, and when she was 12, I think. And very beautiful face. She was the granddaughter of Joe Zarek, who was a painter who lived on the island for a while. So I just started putting broken pottery around the head, and it took about a week to figure it out. And these are pieces that I made out of clay myself. And it's just beautiful. I just love it. Is there another one? Well, this one. Oh, this is one of my very favorites. This one is called Geisha. And I started collecting Asian pottery. A lot of this is Japanese with dragons, plates and bowls. I find them like at the Jamestown thrift store, Savers, here, there, everywhere, yard sales. And this one I just think is balanced absolutely beautifully. Several people have wanted to buy it, but I'm not ready to give it away yet. To sell it yet.
That's a nice feeling.
I've sold several of them.